Wow, Ethan, great moves. Keep it up. Proud of you.
Let's go, my League of Levias. It's Mansant, and today we're actually joined in the virtual flesh by a whole bunch of pretty faces that comprise this here League of Levia. Faces from all around the world. We are trying to put together, a bit of authority when it comes to talking about Levia, because those of us here have actually earned some pretty high ranks ourselves in this League of Levia, all placing in top 8s of RTNs, PQs, or winning skirmishes. So this is hopefully the right group of people to have some true opinions on the matter of where Levia stands in this metagame, and then what's tough about her matchups, what makes things easy, hard, do you grind, do you race? We're going to try to give you all that information today with this lovely group of people here. So guys, roll call.
Hey guys, it's me, Nirvash. Some of you have seen me from past videos. So I've
top 8
wins, I think 3 in total, actually 4 with Levia before, using hybrid builds, club builds, and even Blood Debt builds. So that's me. If you guys know, I play from Hong Kong.
Hi, I'm Jack. I ran the Discords as Jack. I've done a top 4 in a Pro Quest with Levia on the Claws build, and I've been playing her since Monarch, so I've got some experience behind me.
Yeah, my name is Xelerin. I'm from Austria, Vienna. I mainly played Blood Debt Levia, but my Pro Quest top 4 and top 8 was both with Pummel.
And I'm Peyton, long lost Levia player. It was my first year that I picked up, but I since don't play it as much anymore.
So what we wanted to do today was just talk through each one of her matchups, try to gauge whether it's a harder matchup with all of our collected experience, an easier matchup, whether we need to take this to more of a race, more of a grind. And we're going to assume that we're talking about Levia with Blood Debt actually being part of the game plan. So whether it's like some kind of hybrid, Hexagore, Claws, just the more thematic Levia playstyles. Guys, let's go ahead, get started here with all the way back in Welcome to Wraith with the fan favorite, Bravo. So we'll kick us off here. So I normally tend to start thinking about it in like more of the grind space, but you do have to be aware that they could race you a little bit. SO recursion package, right, is obviously going to come in, but then it's also one of your harder matchups because they have this ability, the really smart Bravos, the Kill McCrease of the world, to conserve HP, then use that HP lead for a pivot turn where they try to pummel and crippling. And that's always what's really tough, but I think we figured it out at this point. There's ways around that. There's like the energy potion, maybe you run like one unmovable, but I'd probably start tucking it about like right here.
I tend to think of it more of a race. I tend to think if you go from start getting the card lead early, you can start to push them back a little bit. I tend to find an early blood rush really helps with that, kind of pushing them down. But definitely on the harder end of things still.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Oh yeah, an early blood rush is like, that's always fantastic, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, especially if they are going greedier with like maybe 6 pummels, like the Zealous into you and all that. Yeah, you're right. Like an early push, all those 2 blocks, like they're just going to be behind from that.
Yeah, for sure. You definitely don't want to get hit by any of the on hits, especially when you definitely have to maintain that blood debt.
Interesting. Anyone think it's more of a grind still? Because there are Bravos that will just try to take this to like the fatigue route. They've got their blessings, maybe even sigils, almost everything blocks 3. And so if you're not like focused on recursion, they can just let you bleed out. So I'm always going to take recursion into this matchup. Is that wrong?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the thing with Bravo I feel is in my local armories, the Bravo players prior to the chain Living Legend tended to play really grindy and into the fatigue plan, and the new lists are really more on, as you said, Zealous Belting and the pummels, and also tougher to grind because I think most Bravos don't, at least in my community, are like, alright, pummel is terrible for Levia, take the aggressive round, and nobody really says, alright, let's try to tank it because they know you are on the recursion package.
It's actually a good point. You mentioned that the Bravos right now are more aggressive,
yes.
And I think that's absolutely right because of the Prism problem. So, okay, guys, you're swaying me. That's why we're here. We'll go ahead, put it on more of the race plan, but I would at least still bring in like the Howls. I wouldn't go like 0. But
yeah, obviously.
Okay,
you want the option to grind.
Right. Okay, cool. So then we've got Dorinthea, who's always a contentious point. Nirvash, kick us off.
I hate Dorinthea.
Oh, you're in Hong Kong, where all the good Dorinthias are.
Oh
That's where
yeah.
Josh
Yeah,
Lau was
there's this
born
one
and
really
raised.
good Dorinthea in Hong Kong, really good. I think she would be more. I would still race a Dorinthea because she does have limited resources and she has and we still have a big piece of armor like Husk to block off one big turn and the switch tempo. I would still race, but she does seem to be a little bit harder, especially now that she has new cards like Glistening Steelblade, which is really hard to block. So I think she would be more on the harder end, and it really depends again where your damage comes from. If sometimes even in Levi, we know we might have hands that has no block, and it has like Deadwood Rumblers, Doomsdays, Reckless Swings. Those cans kind of affect you, and it really depends on how you draw into her. But I do think she would be a little bit more to the maybe the right side. It's easy, but you still have to race her. I would say, yeah.
Right. I've run into this problem with Dorinthea where the really smart players like Josh Lau level can use Dorinthea's armor suite, which is fantastic. Use the 3 blocks to just like on their like decision point, just start tanking you out. Because if you do go full race against Dorinthea, then you can run really light on Graveyard. Because man, if you only take like 1 or 2 turns to block, then you've probably only got like a couple turns in you where you don't really have to worry about blocking later in the game, especially if you try to use like a Husk pivot, then that's a turn you didn't like Graveyard fill. And Dorinthea can see that and abuse that. So this is a matchup where actually like I do tend to bring the Howls at least as well, just because you need something to just not let Dorinthea do that to you, because that can feel really bad, because then you're losing to like Dorinthea's just outsmart you at every step of the way. They can play around your blocks really well. They can play around your blood deck game plan pretty well. So yeah, it's definitely harder against the really good Dorintheas. And I would always tuck the Howl. So about like here feels.
We've not seen much Dorinthea in CC over here yet. There's a couple building it up now. Prism's getting towards Living Legends, and I've played a few recently, but she's not been big in CC. It's definitely a hard game. Like. I don't know what to say about it, really. You just want to race her. Because sometimes you want to throw down your hand against Dorinthea and just block 12. We can't do that. But I definitely think it's a hard race. Yeah. Harder than the Bravo one, for sure.
Harder than Bravo?
I think it's an awful matchup, but I just don't know how to block, so maybe that's just me. I think Glistening throws a spanner in that works, though. One good Glistening turn and you're behind then for the game.
It's a key card right now. It's a very big card, very big switch to a Dorinthea deck right now.
Man, that's true. Yeah. Okay. We'll still skewer more hard then, because that card is a big deal.
Yeah. Before the classic battles, I would have agreed with your friend that Levia is a really hard matchup for Dorinthea, especially because before the classic battles, you could also just say, "All right, I take the sword hit," and reprise wouldn't trigger because you wouldn't block with any cards. But with run through, especially, which automatically gives go again in the attack reaction step, which I think I remember they don't have that many cards to give go again in the reaction step.
It was just Glint. Yeah.
Just Glint, and with 3 more cards, it's not the best thing to do. Just say, all right, take it.
All right. Well, geez, we're gonna have to test this one more when Prism's gone, because she does seem like a good deck. Okay, so then next one here on the list, Katsu.
Hard to say. It's obviously less of a grind, I would say.
Yep.
But it's also not that easy, because the blocking can be really tricky in Katsu. I don't know the newest Katsu list, because nobody in my community plays Katsu, only 5. But I would say it's one of her easier matchup. It really depends on the list, which I sadly don't know. Not that easy, I would say.
Yeah, well, there's actually there's like the 2 Katsu lists. There's the more like combo centric, the old version, and then there was like the go wide 100 wins that ran Stubbies. That version is, dead. Stubbies is gone. So I would assume that it's back to just the normal combo version, and they really didn't gain enough to outplay someone who just knows how to play against Katsu. Like, it's still tough because they can demand blocks on specific turns, but at this point, I think if you just played it enough, if you know what your deck's trying to do, it should be easier than a lot of the other aggro. I used to think it was a lot harder, but now experience really takes this one, I think. So I'd tend to put it about right here.
In terms of Katsu, I always thought it was actually a tougher matchup for Levia. Just because, again, it's very hard to block. The Kodachis with the Mask of Momentums and the Surging Strikes are just at a very weird number. It's always at a very weird breakpoint. So, I mean, you got to really have the experience to know when to block a Katsu correctly. Especially when you're at low health and the chain is so long, right? It's just Kodachi 1, and it really forces you into a Kodachi lock state. So I think it skews a little bit to a more harder state for Levia, but it's not unwinnable. Again, it really is it's a very skill-based matchup, especially of how you read the Katsu and how their lines are going to go.
Well, actually, I learned something recently that I don't know how I never read the darn card. Mask of Momentum cares about attack action cards being chain link 3 or higher. So in my brain, you always just like block the Kodachi because the third Kodachi could draw. That's not even true. So I think I've played this game wrong for a long time now, and still I was finding Katsu to be more manageable these days just by also Crown of Providence being that big help to try to dig through all reds. Because I feel like the way you lose this game was drawing all reds, because that was the turn where like you couldn't block the way you wanted, right? So I think that little bump of Crown and the fact that now I'm big brain, I would still not call it as hard. Well, we can put it more in the middle. What do you think, Jack?
Yeah, I think middle sort of race is fine. They've got a new
race.
Yeah, like so race, but like middle difficulty where it kind of is now. To be honest,
Okay,
seems pretty good. Like it's just about knowing how to block. It's like Dorinthea, but a bit less punishing if you don't block as well. Like you say, you can just chuck gear at the Kodachis and try not to end up at 2 HP.
Cool. Well, he's also one of the honestly less relevant heroes right now, so not one we like super have to worry about. It's Fi that we'll get to for sure. So let's move on to Rhinar here.
I think it depends because I think they set the pace. In all honesty, because there's a grindier list and a racier one because they'll play claws or club. So I think you've just got to follow what they're doing because I think they can have some more consistent big turns. I think their blood rushes are a bit more consistent. I think they've got more consistent action points through Sand Sketch Plan. So I think it can be quite tough to gauge till you're kind of in it. Personally, I've not got the greatest experience in the matchup again, but yeah, I'd say it's kind of very dependent. I know that's not much of an answer, but
no, it's true though. Like there are the multiple ways to take the game. I think I like the issue against Rhinar, like the only issue against Rhinar is like those early intimidates personally, because we're one of the few decks where the early intimidates actually did affect how we wanted to block. Like a lot of other aggro doesn't care about an early intimidate, but sometimes against Levia, like that can be what really hangs you up from, well, shoot, I just like can't block with this, like, and have a turn. Because, we're not like, but we're not weapon based, so we can't just decide, we'll just like toss this, turn off barraging, like swing a weapon. Like that just doesn't work. We need our specific cards where we want them. But even so, I don't think he's more consistent on Blood Rush. He's gonna intimidate you, but his cost curve is so whack that like it's pretty telegraphed if he's going to force the Blood Rush like on a Tunic turn with a full hand, just so that he can pay for like that claw third attack is really because he doesn't have the one cost so easily like we do in Boneyard. So I think like playing against Rhinar, it is so dependent on like turns 1 through 3. Like how does that early graveyard set up? Can you like maintain parity with him, or do you have to play like a little slower because the intims are bad? I still think he's relatively easier, but you're right. We don't really know where to take it, race or grind. But both those matchups like trend a little easier for me.
The thing I always feel in theory against Rhinar is that if you play the Blood Debt variant and try to grind him, I think we will lose, because at some point he can just triple intimidate and hit us, so he can close the games easier if we sideboard the wrong way. Because if you think, all right, he's going claws, and then we sideboard in the howls, that can be really bad. I think it's still one of the easier matchup, but I think racing sounds like a better plan, because his Blood Rush turn always cost him one more card depending on his last attack because of discard, whereas we can just say claw, and then an attack with banish, and we don't have to discard the extra card. So I think we are just a little bit more consistent in our damage.
So in that case, moving on to Arcane Rising. This set has some pretty spicy heroes, not gonna lie. So kicking us off here, we've got oops. Well, we'll start with Dash. I meant to click Azalea. Dash, Peyton, you've got a lot of experience here. What do you think?
I mean, the person who I have experience with, of course, Alberto. One of the harder matchups that you can face when you're facing because they live for the late game. What they're gonna try to do, at least his version, he's gonna stall you out, and he's gonna try to just keep pinging like that efficient damage, like at the end. And then what you're gonna want to do is you're gonna want to race and just try to keep getting overhead before he gets all that set up. Because once he gets that set up, you know what I mean. He's obviously in favor.
Well, you're speaking to more of like the control dash or like the
Yes, yeah,
mid-range flip.
the control dash, the aggro dash. I feel like is one of the easier matchups that Levia will have. Just based on the fact that I mean, I don't think a lot of people are running Arc Smash. I don't even think you need it at this point. But
No, yeah, I wouldn't run Arc Smash and Blood Debt Levia ever, but yeah, like Dash is one of the ones that once again I think you need to scout, because if it's like hard control, then obviously you need the recursion and you need to just grind them through, because if you can do the Howl loop and just always throw 12, then they'll never even get to come back with pistols, and you'll eventually just close. So I still think like if you know they're on the grind, it tends to be pretty good for you. If they are on the racing version, I don't know if I've just like never seen the God tier Dash pop-off turn, but I've played against some very good Dash. Alberto Miracles, who's Peyton talking about, the top 8 Vegas guy. And I don't know, I've just never seen their insane high octanes like do anything scary, because it's so few and far between and they have to keep so many cards to pull it off. Whereas we can be more card efficient on our like bigger Blood Rush turns and still present pretty equal damage that I feel like they fall behind on the card efficiency.
Well, I haven't played against a Dash in a while, but from my experience, again, there's two variants, right? Aggro and mid-range control. I think the aggro one is kind of very easy because Dash doesn't have a lot of hit effects. So nothing that really hurts us in any way. It's just raw damage. And in comparison with raw damage, Levia is going to win for sure. So in terms of the blocking version, which is very tough in a way, if they block correctly and if the game lasts until their time when they get 2 or 3 of their items out and then they just start racking their gun, then it gets tougher, obviously, because at the end the chain gets longer, the damage is harder to stop, to defend against. But again, that one card we mentioned about the Arc Smash, which costs 3, I don't think it's good, but again, it's not very efficient for our deck to use. And but yeah, I think Dash is a very fair deck. It's very similar to Levia. They're both very fair decks. Depends on pilot, and both can win. But I would always put her on the easier side, assuming they would always go the mid-range build into Levia, which is still winnable for us, especially when we go into the Howls and then just kind of get the loop going. It should be fine.
Right. So once again, yeah, scout it out, and it's like a lot easier. But if you have to take a guess, I think it still sits somewhere here because you at least toss the Howls in, right?
The thing with Dash in comparison to Rhinar for me is even if you don't know, okay, is he hard aggro, is he mid-range control, is he classic mid-range with tackler pounder, and also I would always take the Howls in because because if you say, okay, I have Howls and he's aggro, that's bad, but not too bad. But if he's control and you don't have the Howls, then that's a problem. So I think it's easier to sideboard if you don't know which deck list he's on, because I would always take the Howls into this matchup.
Yeah, and the beauty of Howls as well, even against aggro, is your Boneyards can be a 2-card hand for 9. They just become an extra endless. So they still have their spot even in an aggro matchup. So yeah, that sounds like good placement. Okay, so then we'll bring back Azalea. And man, everyone memes on this hero, but we got to show her some respect because we also play a memed on hero. But I don't think Levia is in the same camp as Azalea. So applause to everyone who does those tier lists and makes Azalea her own tier and not like Levia Azalea, because Azalea really is something else. She's, as I've learned, actually, like, not as clunky to play as I thought. I thought that was more of her issue when I was trying to play her. I'm just bad. Her main issue is always just the consistency, the fact that she needs to keep so many cards for what ends up being not really card efficient damage for hit effects that you have to hope actually are winning you the game. That ends up being the issue. If that's not the case with what her arrows are doing, then she's just not a good deck. Folds over because her armor's bad. Folds over because she can't block very well with her cards from hand anyway. I just look for playing against Levia. There's one card that I care about, and I'm sure we all know it's Sleep Dart. I actually think Crown of Providence fixed this, because what would get you? You would run Skullcap in that matchup previously. And what could get you is when you have the life lead, because you probably will in that matchup. They can't match something like Blood Rush. And then they come at you with a Sleep Dart, even for 5 Dominate late. That would just suck, because you probably toss Scab somewhere else just because you had to at some point. But now Crown is just 2 on demand. That is so much bigger than having Skullcap that would just block 1, like in those later phases. And because of that, I just do not even care about playing Azalea against Azalea anymore. Like, I just don't think you lose it. It already felt pretty good unless Sleep Dart lined up, and now you have counterplay in your equipment.
Even though we are the second meme hero, I think Azalea is more meme. So racing and easy in the top right corner, I think.
Yeah.
That's the right spot. Yes, Sleep Dart is bad, but we have Husk, and we have Crown of Providence and Scabskins, so
It's a lot.
it would be a really weird, we would misplay really hard if we throw the Carrion Husk early and we couldn't block the later Sleep Dart. So I think it's a pretty easy matchup.
All right, so next on this list, Kano. And this is one that I really just hate seeing across from the table.
Okay, so again, Kano is a very tough deck because you gotta know what you're doing against the Kano. But again, when you're playing Levia, you can't really do much because our pitch is so tight. I would say everything runs around 1 blue pitch, and we probably most of the time our hands are sculpted into 2 reds, 2 blues, or maybe even 3 reds, 1 blue. And we need all that resource to basically dish out our damage. And you would never have the extra arcane to push out to block out the Kano. So what I usually do is, you know what, go full aggro against them, hope for the best, do as much damage as you can in a short amount of time. Because you always realize one thing, Kano is handicapped, right, in terms of health compared to Levia. You should abuse that. Don't play their game, play your game. Go aggressive as much as you can. If you draw good, if you do a Blood Rush turn very early, they're probably dead.
There's a world, I think, where like you really build your deck to target Kano with like the Wild Rides, Pulpings, maybe, you know, help some of that graveyard acceleration, because the normal Blood Debt lists still struggle with that aspect, which is graveyard fill against the Kano, so you can try to push that aggro. But if you didn't find like that early Blood Rush, Art of War, something to get the graveyard proactively filled, that's what ends up tripping you up in the race. But you're right, that's the strategy you should take. Just, you know, if you don't have the right deck built to really enable that without blocking, that can be a bit of a tough spot. What do you think, Jack?
Yeah, I definitely think it's a race, but it's a hard one. I think it really depends on how they draw. I think really depends on how we draw. Like the early Blood Rush, that's what, if you do it well, that's 2/3 of their health. Like you can really push that if you get that right. I'm not sure if I'd take Meat Axe in this matchup or not. I don't think I would, but yeah, I do think it is just a race.
Yeah, where would you?
want the,
in terms of you know, how hard it is, what are we thinking? Even tougher?
I don't think it's as hard as the Bravo and Dorinthea, but it is
Okay.
definitely up that corner, I think, because they can just clap back with ridiculous turns if they do it right.
Right.
And like Novash says, we don't run the pitch to block anything really. You might have an extra blue in your hand, block 3 on a wildfire, and hope for the best, but it's not the way we do it.
Right.
It's definitely easier than Bravo and Dorinthea. I mean, he's 10 health under, right? So I mean, that's benefit to us. So I mean, it has to be a bit easier, but still hard on that part.
All right, so wrapping up Arcane Rising, we've got Viserai, who, thank goodness, we don't have to talk about the Skeleta playstyle. Now we're just kind of on fair aggro / mid-range Viserai, which is still a massively powerful arcane damage deck, which is kind of that vein of Kano that can make it tough at times. Peyton, what do you think about this one?
One of the most consistent decks you can get right now. I think you pretty much just have to go for the race, stalling them out and then taking like the arcane pings here and there. It's just really not going to do it for you. Like it's just it's probably, well, obviously Briar's not on there yet, but I'd say he has a better versus into Levia than Briar does, so he's a little bit harder to face. And that's my insight on it.
Yeah, I would. I now that I've played a lot into Viserai, with some of the newer builds out there, it's not as tough as I was thinking. I mean, a Mordred Revel is still just gonna eat your health like you wouldn't believe, and make Husk something that you don't really get to determine when to block with, because they're just gonna trickle it out, and you probably just have to chump it in like a 4-block. I think that's actually a lot of the deciding factor playing against Viserai is such a slim health margin that it comes down to, did you actually get full value out of Husk or not? I feel like every game against Viserai is really that tight. But it's not just the auto loss that the Skeleta playstyle used to be. So, like at this point, I've only lost to one Viserai in this entire RTN season. So I think I'm 4 or 5-1 against them, even beating Isaac Root, the top 4 Pro Tour player. And yeah, it really comes down to those really tight margins. You need to play such a tight game. You need to do like small, like preemptive blocks, like noticing, all right, if I chump scabs on something here, that's not even a hit effect. It's just protecting thresholds that matter with like Rosetta damage, like maybe 2 turns in the future, like whatever. There's little things that come up that make this matchup actually okay. But I'd still put it as something that takes a lot of skill to beat. It's definitely a race.
Yeah, it's incredibly consistent deck. It's tough once they get going, if they get some good hands, to claw anything back, really. I mean, Shrill is an incredible card, and I think they're running 9 of them. Yeah, it's definitely a race, and it is tight, like you say. I think it just comes down to your experience playing against the Viserai. Like, a good Viserai, I think, wins that. But an average game, I think it's pretty close.
Yeah, there's there's also the argument of like, do we take AB or not? And actually, right now, I don't know if you guys have tried this, but I am actually taking Null Gloves for just the late game, for when they try to just, all right, I'll block 3, keep a blue, Rosetta swing, because they can try to get on this plan as soon as you're down to like 5 health or so. If they see you don't have AB, and just a smart Viserai says, okay, everything blocks 3, block 9, maybe leak a little bit, and then just deal you an arcane, and you're just like guaranteed dead. And when they do it that way, you also don't get good graveyard fill, and the late game falls apart. So I take the one piece of Null Rune more to make them think they can't do that, more than anything. And it's worked. It is like actually come together now, because that was the late game I really feared. But yeah, definitely like one of the harder ones.
So I think for Viserai, again, it's much easier now compared to before. It's actually playable, but he generates a lot of value in terms where we can't block. Arcane is always a problem for Levia, as I said. Same with Kano, and I think it's even worse for Viserai because you don't really want to block the one pings, and Runeblades just have that crazy weapon, the Rosetta, which is I still think is broken till this day. One cost for a 2/2 split damage is still immense. You can only block one ends of it, so you're always going to leak at least 2 or 4 on either ends of those damage. So which is very, very tough for us. But it's playable now. It's a race. Force them into blocking again. Push their damage down. But I mean, they're very consistent, especially now with the belittle build, right? So they can search for pitches. They can search for more cards and card advantage to them to their hands, which is very good for our Viserai right now. So they're in a good state. They aren't the best, but a consistent deck in the middle ground. So I still think racing is the best, but definitely not a dead game like before when it was like 3-7 for us. But now it's probably like 5-5. I would say it's 5-5.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. When you put it that way, it's up to more of what they're drawing. It does seem a lot more dark because they really can just draw insane low effort 4-card hands. Like they don't even necessarily care about Arsenal, to just, toss out the Mauvrion turns, go wide, toss in like Revel as well. All of a sudden a 4-card hand is hit effect 4 rune chance, like another 5 rune chance, like Rosetta at the end. For super low effort. So when you say it that way, when it's up to more of what they draw, then yeah, I mean, like what can you really do. Your game plan is just at the mercy of like how much more damage they're drawing. So yeah, well, it's definitely harder, mostly because there's not as much agency, I'd say.
Yeah, that's only my experience with the matchup. But
No, but
yeah,
that
it
is
obviously
true.
can go different, as we see with your Road to Nationals games.
But okay, let's look at what game next. Monarch, our set, our year-old
Hey.
set that marks our birthday for Levia here. We're not gonna. I mean, we can just toss this out there. Levia, the mirror match. What can you do? We'll just toss that there, so she looks pretty on screen. But Boltyn, here we go. First hero in Monarch. One of my favorites as well. That really got me into the game because he's another like pretty fair deck if you're not playing Lumina. And fair decks are really fun. Like if you've ever played like Boltyn versus Dash, it's one of the most fun games. Like it's so beginner friendly. Great way to get into CC. But that's a I digress. Zalaran, what do you think about where Boltyn sits?
Depending on the list of Boltyn, but I have found that it's a fair game, but definitely easier for Levia, especially because in the combo version with double Lumina or so, it feels like you just have to maintain a high enough HP to just block the turn and say, all right, I live, and then it's mostly an easy game. That's what my matchups went like, because the Lumina has an on-hit, but it's not that important. Like, it doesn't create rune chance.
Well, so if we look at Boltyn more in the Lumina style, because that's the only build that's really played right now. Excuse me. You're right. If we use our like husk, we save our equipment obviously for that turn. We can deny like 4 to 6 life that they'd gain from Lumina. They're still going to go off with the rest of those attacks, but that's such a stronger pivot than most other aggro decks have into their combo turn, because we save so much HP, we denied so much of their healing, that the only thing that blows us out at the end is like if they get, you know, their attack reaction, Beacon of Victory off with like their giant soul.
So speaking of Boltyn, again, it's a very fair deck. I don't think we actually have to bring in the Howls. Instead, I actually want to push as much early damage as possible against a Boltyn. You don't want them to set up double Luminas, and the Raiden builds just doesn't. I don't think it exists in the current meta. So it's always going to be a combo Lumina build, and you want to. They're a setup deck, so they're probably just going to be trying blocking you the early games, and you can still leak some damage here and there, but you can't let them get to their combo. Remember, we used to actually sideboard pummels against like this build, and then we would just try to use the Tunic as well. We would Tunic, and then we would probably like CNC, hit a pummel, and then just get rid of the combo in turn. But I think the current Blood Dead build doesn't have space for that. So I mean, if you can really disrupt the Boltyn, they don't really do much. Blood Dead Levia, obviously we don't have a lot of disruption. It's raw damage. So just pummel, just beat them in the race. Don't let them set up. I think that's the only way to really deal well with a Boltyn right now.
Yeah, for sure. So I think we're all in consensus. It's one of the, it's easy, but the challenge is there. You're on a bit of a clock, right?
See, I'm not sure about that. To be the disagreeer here, we have a Boltyn in my local meta who I don't think I've ever beaten. They're willing to just sit there, take the game as long as it'll go, setting up these turns. We don't have any disruption. We've not got any threat really outside of damage, but they're running soul shields, they're running defense reactions, they'll block with 3 of their cards. They don't care. They'll like he'll sit there and build his deck, and you can just watch really. And then once they get the double Lumina, triple Lumina, I find it's too low by then. But that's just me. Clearly, I'm the outsider here on that view. But
no, that's my fear against Boltyn is like games should go that way, in that like they don't really need to do anything. They put their 1 card in arsenal and then just full block from there on out. Yep. But that's just not been my experience. In my head, I feel like it's scary for what you're saying. So have you tried, like, even when you throw in like some of the howl pieces, something to just keep your damage up there? It's just not working.
I don't think the amount of damage we can present does anything. Like, say, they'll drop 4 cards if they've got something good in their arsenal and nothing in their hand. Like, they'll tank the damage. Because then they're healing quite a lot anyway back off their Luminas, I find. Yeah, like you say, I think pummels, CNCs, I think they're huge, but we can't afford to be running that combo. I think
Yeah.
Claws just struggle. For me personally, Claws just struggles into the Boltyn.
Yeah. Well, there's a huge breadth of Boltyn players, right? So we'll keep it about right here. So just avoid that guy in Jack's Meadow, all right, everybody?
Yeah. Don't come over here.
I mean,
yeah.
I think also if Jack wouldn't have said it, I would have said it, that the thing with racing him is, he will just throw 3 cards into your attacks, 4 cards into your attacks, just waiting for the setup.
Mhm.
And when the setup's there, then he can block with the Courage of Bladehold, which he then will pop in this turn. So he fills up his soul. Maybe can go down to around 10 life or so, but healing himself up to 20 while dealing around 30 damage. So I feel like just taking everything he throws at you while throwing everything you have at him, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you've talked me into it. This is how it goes in my head anyway. It's scary. I don't know if in practice it always ends up being as hard because maybe the smart Boltyns are just few and far between. But we're gonna assume you're playing against that Jack local. Next hero in Monarch, we've got Prism, because Chain is gone anyway. So let's look at our girl who's also almost gone. Nurvash, what do you think?
2 points.
2 points. I know, crazy.
Prism, I love playing against Prism. I think with all 3 builds that we've mentioned before, Claws performs the best against Prism. Just the amount of go against we have, the ability to abuse the scabs. I think the only way to lose against the Prism is really to get double ones, like we all have, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's easy. We can block out all her heralds. She will most likely play auras against us anyways, but if you know how to play against their auras or which to attack into, Genesis is a kill on spot. You see it, get rid of it. Some of the other ones, as we always say, it's contextual. We can just figure out which one to hit. Otherwise, just chase their face. They don't have a lot of blockability with their hands. And even so, if they do have the Arclight Sentinel turns, it's not gonna. It takes a lot of resource on their part. It's a very expensive card. It might even fail blocking out your turn because you can just go again and then roll your scabs, hit it with a claw and get rid of it. So it's not always very efficient for them. I would definitely put Prism on the easier end and more maybe towards the middle. I don't even think it's a hard race for us.
That's true.
Near Azalea, right there in between the dash, it would be perfect. Very manageable play by us. But if we were playing the Pummel Bone Basher build, it would be much harder for us because it doesn't have a lot of 6s comparably, and the disruption doesn't really hurt them as much. For Blood Debt, I would definitely say Prism is a very good matchup, and just get her out of the way, please. 2 points.
Yes, I know.
Someone hurry up.
Well, it's interesting because she's like, it's our game to lose against Prism more than anything, because we should block our heralds. We should be able to play around some of the Arclight turns with scab skins. We should be able to sometimes clear double problematic auras that no other deck can do. But what loses you the game, and it's almost exacerbated in this matchup because you roll scabs a bit more than normal, is the double one or the graveyard whiffs. I feel like those are the only 2 ways I lose this game. And if even one of those things happen, the game is just instantly over. And it's so rough because Prism, you give her an inch, she takes a mile. So you slip up that one turn, and then you're behind 3 auras now. And the next turn, 4 auras now. And it's our game to lose. And I really feel like a lot of times we do just lose. but Nurvash, you play against really good ones. I take your opinion on this because you play the matchup perfect regardless. What do you think, Jack?
Yeah, I think it's either an easy game or you're dead. It's like you say, it's the double one happens. I think you do carry on just rolling because it's over anyway by then, really. Yeah, definitely one of the easier matchups we have because we do have the AP generating ability to kill these auras on site, and a lot of 6s to back up the Herald block.
Looking at our next set here, Tales of Aria. What a lovely set, right? Lovely set. We've got Briar kicking us off. Boogeyman, Runeblade for a bit. Now it might be Viserai more on top there. But Briar, she's one of those decks where it really feels like to me did you see Blood Rush or did she see Channel Mount? But I don't want to chalk up the entire matchup into just that, but it is a racing matchup. And it is a matchup where you're gated by these big power cards. So I don't like playing it because it really feels like you can just look at your first 3 hands and kind of just determine who's going to be ahead. It's another one of those games where if you don't get full use out of Husk because of the little bits of arcane she can also try to abuse you with like Mordred, Grasp, Rosetta, you're also going to be really behind. So there's like a bit more player skill that's going to interact with how close that matchup becomes. There's a lot of breakpoints that really matter, yada yada. It's kind of in the middle ground for me. It's obviously a race. I think tucking it about like right here feels probably good.
Pretty much the point, and where I would put Briar, because and you said you can't use the Husk effectively. I think I have to disagree with that. Just because Channel Mount Heroic pumps every card they have to 7, which if you see this the snatch in the Channel Mount turn, I just put the Husk in there because where else would you block with it?
Yeah.
But the snatch.
Well, the Husk can then buy you back some of the pressure they have on their channel mount that like another aggro deck doesn't. So that's like at least a bit more of a leg up there. It has gotten awkward because this was a matchup like you mentioned with 7 that I did like Skullcap for, because you could really easily like even get good value off the initial 2 block by just going down from like a Rosetta swing early. Maybe just chump it on something, get the 2 block out the way, because that 1 block and equipment really was important for those 7 breakpoints on channel mount. And that is something I do miss moving to Crown of Providence. And Jack, I see you nodding. What do you think?
Yeah, I just think it's about who bricks first in this matchup, I find, more so than Blood Rush versus Channel Mount, because Briar can
Really?
brick.
Yeah.
You get those 4 non-attacks, that's it. Like, you play a couple, hope for the best. I think Crown helps prevent that. I get what you're saying about
Sure.
Arcanite, but I think Crown does mean that we're not going to brick before they do. And
Well,
I think
they're
that
also
helps a
running
lot.
Crown, though, aren't they?
Yeah.
They are, that's true.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a good estimate of where it should be, to be fair. It is a race, but played right, we should win it.
I would hope so. I think actually, Peyton, you play Briar a ton. What's I know, you freaking betrayer. What's your opinion on the matchup? Because we played a bunch now.
That it's like, oh my god, like how quick is our match? They're like 5 minutes, maybe 7 minutes. You got an Oldhim match that's behind us. We were able to watch the whole game. It's basically like you're punching each other in the face, and whoever punches the hardest really goes through. It's really crazy.
Yeah, it's actually like one of the more interactive ones too, because they're an aggro deck that has hit effects. So I feel like on the Levi side, it really feels like you're making an impact like turn by turn, not just like dumb racing. So I enjoy it, but you see like a turn 0 channel mount, and that's less exciting. Okay, so then next RA hero, and this is another like super contentious one. We've got Lexi, and it's hard to talk about Lexi, right? Because there's like 3 builds. Honestly, there's like the kind of vanilla Lexi, there's the like lightning Lexi, there's the lightning's not. It's kind of like lightning ice, and then like true ice. So I feel like I also don't play against very good Lexi players around here. So who does?
So me personally, I would say this is an easier matchup strictly because of Husk. Like every single time, like they present like an on hit that you just can't take, you just Husk it, and it just like they usually only get like 1 or 2 big, like really effective arrow turns like per game against you. I'd say it's definitely one of the easier matches, but
Interesting. So from what I have played against good Lexis, when they are on the lightning plan, they go so wide that when they can start off like a 3 arrow turn or something with one of those like minor fuse ones, for some reason their freaking arrows say across every attack, right? And
They do a lot of that.
That makes Husk not very good. When they go that route, Husk just feels like it blocked a vanilla 6 because it wasn't really a hit effect on that arrow, then because that one had the same hit effect, and that can feel pretty bad.
the lightning build is gonna have a lot less of those. Like they're gonna have like the one of ice quakes or whatever. it is kind of harder to face those ones because like, oh, they're gonna present like one frostbite. How much is this gonna affect my turn? There's a lot more thought that goes into it, which leads to a lot more mistakes. But for the ice one specifically, I would say it's easier. The lightning one's a little bit harder because of how much damage they can present. But their equipment, they're also like, it looks like they could block, but they can't use half of it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, that's the one thing that always seems to come up when I play against Ranger is if you actually do play the actual block early game, find pivot turn, aggro for the rest of the game, that just like really black and white phase of the game is something that Lexi doesn't interact really well with because she can't use her armor to try to match your pivot. So you can just, all right, you're going with a couple arrows, I'll leak maybe a little bit of damage here or there, but I'll just wait out some of these good reds that had a little bit of effects. Not so bad, maybe throw like a swing big, cheek in some damage with like, I don't know, minor claw swings here and there. Just something that doesn't ramp up your graveyard or ramp up your blood debt. Then you find your big pivot turn when they slip up, because they're also a deck that has inconsistencies, and then just don't stop from then on out. They have a hard time coming back into that game because of the armor. And that's honestly true in my experience for both like lightning and ice. I find ice to be very easy. I don't know. Yeah. A lot of people say that is like a tough matchup for Levia, but the amount of effort it takes for them to really lock you out is not just reveal, give you a frostbite. It is reveal, frostbite, pump arrow, dominate arrow, fuse arrow. You're talking like 4 or 5 card hands that maybe one of those is going to shut you out. But getting shut out like once per game by that is not over by like any means for Levia. And you also have a lot of these 2-cost cards like Hungerings, like Writhing Beasthulks, Swing Bigs that you can play through just their normal 1 frostbite turns that maintain a lot of aggression that other aggro decks kind of just can't do even through 1 frostbite. So I would definitely keep her in the easier spectrum. A race for sure, but you also need to play the matchup differently. What do you think, Zalaran?
Generally, I think I've never played against the Lightning lists, and I think if you play Lexi, you should definitely play the Ice lists because Fi and Briar and Viserai really hate the Frostbite, so I assume every Lexi will be an Ice Lexi.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, yes, she has 1 to 2 to 3 turns maximum where she can really dish out any arrows. But the thing is, as with the lightning arrows, the ice arrows also say every following arrow has the on-hit effect.
Mm-hmm.
So in a 3 of a kind turn combined with Rain Razors or Out of War, where every arrow hits for 6 and she doesn't even have to fuse more than 1 arrow, only the first, like, what is it? There are 2, one with discard or pay 1 and 1 with create 1 frostbite. Even if she shoots one of these and starts off, then the next one, like Boltyn shot, but it still has the on-hit effect. Then if anything of the Boltyn shots can hit, Endless Arrow could load or another arrow, and then I'm so bad with the names today. The arm piece where you can load your arsenal again and shoot the arrow with +1. These all have these on-hits, which can basically destroy your whole turn. And it's not that hard to set up because you need the 1 pump card like Rain Razors or Out of War and 3 of a kind with 1 fuse card.
Mm-hmm.
Or you just don't even need the fuse card. You can also just play Icequake, which also gives, I think, the effect every following arrow, which I think is really, really hard to play.
Hardest? What do you think, Zalaran?
I think Nervish has some pretty good opinions about the Ice Lexi matchup because I saw him writing a little bit tilted about the matchup.
Yeah, let me take over this because I think the Lexi matchup is kind of a controversial topic. It depends on the region, depends on the player. It's a very I think Lexi is a very skill-based player, hero as well. For both players, you got to know when to take the frostbites, when not to take the frostbites. your opponent needs to know when to send out the frostbites and when not to, and when to push, and so on and so forth. And the amount of go against they have is comparably a lot more than us and a lot more consistent, just because they have their hero skills and they have ways to push over the damage through lightning presses, brain razors, art of wars, and which means Blood Dead Levi we don't even run. I don't think we can put in defense reactions for those anymore. We just can't. It slows us down too much. So again, I think it's debatable. But I've had played against Lexi heroes which just go turn after turn, 3 of kind, Art of War, Rain Razor turn, and then it's 3 of a kind. They just loop that until you don't really have a turn. And once you have that Blood Dead kick clicking, and it really gets to you, right? You can't do too much. You're just taking pings here and there. So another play that I usually do is I actually bring in Goliath Gauntlet with CNC for this matchup, just for that one tempo throw turn. You hold it, you use it, hit them once, and then see if you can throw a tempo, and then you can switch with the Blood Rush and turn the next turn. But again, it depends on how you draw, right? So you only have 3 CNCs, and you only have 3 Blood Rushes for this matchup. All the other cards in your deck, except for Hungering Slaughter Beast, is pretty pitch inefficient against this matchup, especially if they can rack up 2 or 3 Frostbites onto you. One card I really hate, again, Icequake. Your whole chain gets the... you can't block it all. You're going to get 1 or 2 here and there. So I don't think we get to push the damage as much. So I would definitely put her in one of the harder matchups. I would personally even think she's harder than Kano in a sense right here. Yeah.
Oldhim here. Oldhim. Man, this guy, slow and grindy, might be our first guy in this section. What do you think, Jack?
Yeah, it's definitely a grind game. I think the easy or hard depends on how much aggro they're packing, because some of them do just run full. I'm going to sit here. We're going to go to time. I'll either deck you or we draw. I think that's quite a hard game because you really can't just punch through those defenses. I think if they're running a bit more aggressive, it's a bit easier. If they're running like saving hands to do spinals and whatnot, then or Okens, I think that tends to be a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
But I think again, yeah, it's one you maybe want to scout a little bit before you get there, just to see how you're see if you're going to time or not.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing to bring up because in a bigger tournament, right, you would assume that players shouldn't be going for that route. You can't afford draws.
Oldhim is probably the matchup why we say, all right, Levia can win the grind and can fatigue him out, actually, because the recursion package is, I think, against a full fatigue Oldhim, I don't see any other hero have a better matchup, because we basically use 1 card, whereas he has to block around 3 or 4 to block the full 12 we present normally. I would also say it's one of more to the easy side, because Bravo has many hard on-hit effects like Spinal Crush, Crippling Crush, Choke Slam and such, which Oldhim has Oaken Old, where we have the Husk.
Yeah,
so
I would agree.
If he says, okay, I'm gonna play the Oaken Old, double fuse, take, I don't know, 9 damage, we block with Husk, and the next Oaken Old, he has to take much damage again. So that will lead us to a definitely life lead. So we maybe can also afford to whiff Blood Debt 1 time, depending on the state of the game.
Right, yeah, and it's a good point to bring up, like him tanking damage to get X or Y done. The 2 things that come up in this game that do make it trend easier are Blasmafet, because then he's forced to keep 2 cards, and sometimes a 2-card hand isn't even killing Blasmafet for him, unless it's like a raw Oaken or something. And then also, like you're saying, if he wants to pitch stack an Oakenold for late game, I mean, if we didn't have to use Husk on like some blowout Oakenold early, then it doesn't do anything. Like, we're not going to be low enough. Like that whole pitch stack he's trying to get for this double fuse efficient Oakenold hand is a Husk and a card. And then he never gets to keep another hand to do that because he will have eaten like probably, at least half your damage that turn to keep those cards. So yeah, I would I would say trends easier.
The more aggressive they are, the easier the game is for us. I think that's how it tends
Exactly.
to be.
Yep. So no matter what, it kind of exists in this space. So, or you know what? Make
I
everyone
mean, I
mad.
ran
Make
into
everyone mad.
Oldhim.
Easy, all
Yeah.
the way easy. Make everyone mad. I agree.
Easy.
Sweet.
I ran into Oldhim playing 3 Fate for scenes, 3 Sink Belows, 6 Staunches, 3 Unmovables, and I mean they have the pulse of Eisenloft too, right? So I mean they're playing that many defense reactions. They can't have any offense in that deck, obviously. So I have no idea what they're trying to do. But if their game is to fatigue everybody and ask them if you know what, are you gonna let me have the win? Then I don't know. Like
Okay, guys. So leading into the final set here, we've got a convert as well. Peyton, man, you really just left us behind for all kinds of heroes, but your most recent one has been Dromai. So Dromai, this matchup for Levia, honestly, finally feels like in this same category because Oldhim is in this spot, but only because we really are accustomed to the matchup. I think most players it exists maybe over here. Dromai for me is like the true easy grind matchup. Like this is the easiest matchup for Levia. And Peyton, what do you think as a Dromai pilot?
So I got obviously different thoughts. I'm a little biased because I'm starting to play Dromai now, but I feel like it's a bit of a grindy match. I feel like it's like more of a tempo swing, whereas a lot of the Dromai players that you're playing, like especially at the moment, they don't know. Some of them are just going to attack with their dragon rather than just leaving it out on the field when that's you have to do. If they don't attack it, then maybe your next turn you play a Mirage or you play something that'll make it then like, oh well, now I have to attack the Mirage. Are you running claws? Are you running? I would personally, if I was playing Levia, I would run club because the 4 on hit for Mirage is just really good. But
No,
I would
we
like
have
to
Ghostly
change your
Visit.
mind in person. We'll have a match.
Sure.
And
No
hopefully I can
sixes in
change
that
your
club
mind.
build.
No, we would never run club. What we have is Ghostly Visit. The 4 breakpoint you can solve by just tossing in a Ghostly and the rest of your recursion. And my God, like the poor Dromai just like really can't do much because yeah, you can try to hold your cards and keep your dragons and then build up for like the Mariah Chromai turn, whatever, to finally swing some things. But you kept cards to do that. That's free damage that Levia just landed on a game that you've been just like pounding anyway. I really feel like Dromai doesn't have the obvious route to win ever. She's also low interaction, like less interaction than Oldhim really, because they can't even like channel, threaten frostbites, ice pitch. She can try to do her big stuff with her legendary dragons, but even what's the armor one? Tumultai? Like Tumultai is not taking a Tunic. It's not taking a New Horizon. Like it might take Scab, sure, but like I don't really care. I really think if you just play the recursion engine like you should, there's no way you lose this game. What do you think, Jack?
I think it's Prism without as much Spectra. So I think we
Yeah.
like that. I think it's lots of 6s. I think we hit a lot of the breakpoints on the dragons with 1 kill if we need to. If you need to roll Scabs and kill a passing Mirage, that's not the end of the world. Yeah, like you say, I think it's just we just sit down and play the game, and we should end up winning.
And have some fun. Have a free
Yeah,
win for
absolutely.
once. Feels good. Anything else, guys?
Yeah, I think the thing with Dromai is most of the Dromais right now, they're playing a very defensive game with all the defense reactions, sigils, Oasis Respite, so on and so forth. Like we can't name them all, but that's what they're doing, right? Take cover, a sand cover, sorry, warding the damage. So what they're trying to do is they really want to try to do the Oldhim game plan, but the thing that they're lacking is a weapon. So if they don't have a weapon, you can't really do that. So what are they going to do? They're going to come back and ping us with 1 dragon or what? I have no idea what their game plan is right now. So it should be an easy matchup for us, as Jack said. It's definitely an easier Prism with less auras. And if they do come in with a dragon attack or something, you can always throw in a 6 to stop the whole chain. So I mean, she definitely needs some work. And Levia should take her with ease. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing that comes up is the Dromais that are trying to build around these heavy popper decks go in for Ghostly Visit, right? But the difference between playing against like a Bravo or an Oldhim with Ghostly Visit and then trying to set up like a semblance endgame or like the Mage Master passing.
Talk
around,
about
whatever
Ghostly Touch, right?
Oh yeah, sorry,
yeah,
Ghostly Touch. If they try to play for that against Levia, we're not actually taking the game that long. Like we can overpresent damage compared to like how fast Bravo's doing it, Oldhim's doing it. So they don't get this Ghostly Touch. That's just like 20 tall, and then swing it. Like, that's extreme late game stuff that Levia is just not letting it get to. So I really don't see the line for Dromai to like make it even. Like, no matter how it plays right now, it's going to be favored, but Peyton will do some experimenting. Okay, we'll move on to, we've got Fi next, big boogeyman. And this guy, Stubbies is gone, so this is up-to-date tier list. We're ahead of the game here. But he's still relatively scary just because of how low effort his damage is, because of how one bad turn of blocking can make like Assault the Wound, Search Off, Pounce of the Mask of the Pouncing Lynx, whatever it's called, just be these incredible damage turns. But at the same time, like, it's a vanilla race for the most part. You're racing 3 damage per card on his end with some blowouts, and he's racing, hopefully, if you can pull off like 4.5 damage per card on your end, but just with less go wide ability. I don't know, it's trended to be like not a blowout game how I've played it. But I'm willing to be wrong, because obviously he was the best deck in the room with the Calling Outrect. I don't think there was a question there. But vanilla games, like kind of what we were talking about with Dash, trend to be ones I'm willing to play. What do you think, Nirvesh?
I think Fi has its merits. He's a very good deck in terms of damage and consistency. Comparably with Levia, where we have a very difficult time getting our goal again. Sometimes we like some players. I don't roll scabs very often. I'm very skeptical, and then I'm very afraid of rolling scabs. So you don't just get as much go against as or action points compared to Fi. But Fi can take all your raw damage. So what our maximum output with a Blood Rush turn is, I say, 4 to 5 card hand for 18 damage. They can easily do that with 4 hands. And the major problem they have is the Mask of Momentum right now, which forces us to block, and we only have so many equipments that we can take that pivot turn, right? So, their chain goes from anywhere from like 3 to, up to 6, right? Depending on how they draw, or even 8 sometimes if they're lucky on a good Art of War turn. So, I think it's tougher for Levia, and it's definitely a race game. But again, it's winnable depending on our draws, right? Fives they can clunk themselves as well. And it's just the damage here and there, right? The Phoenix Flames coming in for 1, threatening a Mask of Momentum. Are you going to block that? It's just a waste of value on our part, right? And if we give them their hand, what are they going to do? They're going to throw us probably with 3 damage or 4 damage extra on that part. So it's I think it's tough, but not unwinnable. More favored towards Fi, definitely.
But I think, okay, so if it's Mask of the Pouncing Lynx, then it's those blowout turns with Salt the Winds that scare me. But at the same time, it kind of guarantees your Husk is going to block full value, right? So maybe that's not the scarier mask. Maybe Nirvesh is right. Mask of Momentum, with how wide they go, and forcing your equipment down to interrupt it, that would trend to be harder for me. I haven't seen the mask list as much as the Pouncing Lynx, but that's probably just because of the Stubbies change. But you're right, I would be more scared of that version just because of the pressure it puts on blocking. However, we do have good equipment, right? But yeah, interrupting mask with our armor suite, if that's enough, I would still not be too scared of it. I don't know, it's vanilla damage. It's a sometimes fair game. What do you think, Jack?
I might just be traumatized by this, but I think he is the hardest match we have now. I think over here we don't see much Pouncing Lynx. It's all Mask of Momentum over here, so you're constantly playing off 3-card hands because you don't want them to be drawing back up. It's tough then to get things into Arsenal, so you're falling behind on your cards every turn. I think it's when they're coming in for 1s, threatening Mask, it's like, you've only got so much gear to block with those. I think it's a rough game. I think their damage, even if it is just raw damage, is a lot more than ours, and a lot more consistent than ours as well. I might just be traumatized by the the few bad games I've had against him. But
well, okay, so when a deck like this has raw damage on a hand-by-hand basis, that tends to be favorable. There's 2 things there that make these aggro games winnable in my experience. Number 1 is like full value of Husk, right? Which even like the base 5 list is going to run like Lava Burst, which you can block 6 on that. That's cool. But the other thing that really comes up big And I swear, I know Nervesh, you don't do this, but anytime you can play a ghostly, you roll scab skins. In these aggro matchups, that is such huge value. It can't be understated. You get like a ghostly off twice, you dealt 8 damage for free on like a cost curve that you didn't like do anything special for anyway. And those games, I mean, how does a Fi just out of nowhere just throw 4 damage at you? No, that means they drew off mask. That means like you didn't block properly. That means you gave them a free card or whatever. That's how they deal an extra 4 damage out of nowhere. How do we deal an extra 4 damage out of nowhere? Just have to get a little lucky. Just a little bit. And it's Levia, like, you know, we are playing with our own loss conditions, so might as well throw in an extra win condition if we can, as long as it's not 1-1. Sorry, Zalaran. I think those games, yeah, I love Ghostly for those games because it is just, it's free damage. It's so juicy, and I feel like if it comes through, you do win those. But I don't know, might have to test it some more, even post stubbies. Jack, you're in a strong area, so I'll default to you. Would you really say it's harder than Viserai?
I would rather play Viserai than Fi, but that's given that.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Interesting.
we have a lot of strong Fis over here. People have really leaned into him.
Yeah, and he's not that hard to pick up and be like pro player level for. I'd say
It's like you say, a lot of the text on his card doesn't matter. It's an 0 for 3 go again. He's going to have 3 of those. He's going to Phoenix you. He's going to weapon you. It's big. It's wide. It's tough.
Alrighty, and to wrap up this here tier list, which is an interesting shape to say the least, we've got Iyslander, who, as another wizard out there in the field, is another inherently complicated matchup for Levia because Graveyard Fill becomes so hard to manage. But it's a different pace of play than Kano, right? It's a slower, grindier game. But I'm thinking she probably starts to exist in this year region.
I'll go in, yeah. So I've got another hot take, and I think that's quite an easy game. I actually have beaten every Iyslander I've played. I think Meat Axe does work in this matchup.
Yes.
Meat Axe does so much work, and they've got a lot of these cards are discard or pitch, right? So that's just helping us. They'll play 2 of them. I'm like, thank you. Yeah, I needed that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You said everyone you've played, you've beat. I think that's true for me as well, other than like a self-kill yesterday in a skirmish, which I'm traumatized about. But yeah, it's like this game on paper that should just be like this horrible game of taxation and just like such a hard push through Frostbites and interruption with Bleak Expanser, like whatever. But we can get ahead of that. We can run Meat Axe. We can just like take out Blood Rush, these cards that they can interact really well with, and just kind of grind out an early game. And then once we play into Blood Debt, we're obviously going to wait until Recursion's in play. And then it's just a toolbox deck. Like we have our Ghostlies, our Deeper Evils, our Howls, and we're just going to play what's efficient on the turn. And if Iyslander wants to maintain like her play pattern, she can't full block. And so the damage leak is there and she starts a little lower. Like I would actually agree. In experience, it's ended up being easier. In theory, it should be harder.
I don't think she can turn out enough Frostbites to make much of a difference. She gets some big turns on them. I would say I think giving her as few windows as possible is the way to do it, though. So I don't think Howl from Beyond's great because they can just respond to that with something to give you like 3 or 4 Frostbite and then.
Oh well, that's what I mean. You use it as a toolbox. So like I'd still run like a Howl, right?
Yeah.
Like you want your options when you have them. Like when they don't have an arsenal, then okay, yeah. Howl's free. You know, it's just that kind of thing.
True.
So, but you can't like true grind, like you're saying. And also because then that helps their game plan of Insidious, the amulets, the Frost X, if they're even citing that into Levia. I'm not quite sure what their strat is there. So I, probably from our experience, probably about right here. What do you think, Nervash?
Either bring Meat Axe or bring Club. And just try clubbing and then making damage leak. Eventually you'll win somehow. But yeah, that's usually how I grind out my games with Iyslander.
Yeah, and actually winning somehow, just to make that more specific, Dominate is actually quite good against Iyslander because their arsenal is not a defense reaction.
Yeah.
And definitely. You can almost call that every turn. They're trying to play their defense reactions like out of hand. And so when Levia gets into that state where it's like super tall writhings or like, convulsions off a big hand to just force close, like Iyslander normally just dies. that's probably where we'll wrap it. I think the one thing we didn't talk about was the Levia Mirror, and I don't know, like for me, this is actually kind of a game where I'd really be interested to play against another really good Levia because it hasn't happened yet. Because I think it's impossible to lose the mirror for the better player. I think it's actually the better player will always win the mirror because you have such utter control over when you choose to turn aggressive. And if you just play like a really slow early game and you're the second one to commit to blood debt, I think you always win. I don't know. That's my thought on it. I don't know if y'all have played against another really good Levia.
New video idea for us, right?
Oh, whoa, we're about to do a Levia bracket? That'd be
Wow.
interesting.
Yeah, that'd be very
Ooh.
cool.
Interesting, right? Yeah.
Brewings
tournament.
for Levia tournament. And there's a lot of builds out there. That'd be a little spicy. I like that. Not gonna lie, I've been playing some CC Talishar. Not even kidding.
No,
We've got a
no.
brew. We've got a brew. I'm not even kidding. So yeah, we could spice that up. That's a good idea for next video. But guys, any last thoughts before we wrap this up for the league here?
I think even though the tier list may look not that good for Levia with so many meta heroes in the hard bracket, the thing is we can always, if we draw blood rushes, we can pretty much high roll most of them, if not all of them.
Mm-hmm.
If we just have a banger turn after banger turn with Blood Rush, Art of War, Scab Skins not being a 1, but being a 4 or 6.
Oh yeah.
I think we pretty much have a chance against almost every hero.
Yeah, I would agree. And we're talking about, we're saying these matchups are hard only because we're respecting like the really good players who also know what they're doing into Levia. And I still think we prey quite heavily on the people who don't play into Levia. And that almost shifts like this entire thing over by like, you know, a good like 3 inches. Just because like the experience of your opponent to be able to see your graveyard and say, even as an aggro deck, like a Viserai that's like, you know, all block 3s anyway, to be able to say, oh, you're at 1 card in graveyard, off turn, Arsenal, go. And like force blood debt in an aggro matchup, you're just always going to lose that. But not everyone is really playing that way. And so you can kind of gauge your opponent's skill level as the Levia and play more loose, play more tight. But we become the adaptive hero and can actually like kind of get ahead on our opponent's skill here. But man, I just love playing Levia because you sit down and like Zalaran just said, there's a shot. You sit down, it might even be Bravo, and you're like, I know the line to win. I know it's hard. I know how to win though. And you just play for it. And that's true for pretty much every matchup on here, right? So that's why we love her. That's why we love her.
Yeah,
She gives us a shot.
100%.
100%. Yeah. And we're all, you know, different parts of the world over here. We're all repping the league, and that's what we want to impart on all the viewers here. Become your local Levia legend, right? There's like one of us at every locals. And you'll be here one day making tier lists, making videos with the league. We want you out there winning the skirmish season, topping those RTNs, making day 2s of all the nationals coming up, the callings. Heck, I'll win the Pro Tour, right? And that's just going to happen.
Yeah, do it. Just do it.
Yeah, just do it. Cool. But hey, guys, thanks for joining me. This was a lot of fun and a nice, you know, experiment of, you know, what it takes to bring the league together and make videos like this. I think it was a lot of fun. So thanks a lot, guys. Yeah, we'll sign off.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Later.
Bye.
See you in the
Thank you, bye.
See you later.